But she was also aware of the truth, and she was prepared to get it on the record. On the weeks preceding the filing of the legal case, Christine struggled with fear and guilt. Would this hurt the children? Would she lose friends within the family? Would they believe her? But whenever those doubts crept in, she revisited the same thought. If I don't stand up now, I never will. And that thought was enough to ground her. By the time Christine filled out the paperwork, she wasn't the same woman who had quietly suffered for all those years of being pushed aside. She was centered. She was ready. And she wasn't afraid. Friends who happened to see her during and around that period reported that she walked differently. Shoulders held back, eyes unclouded, voice assertive. Christine had been underestimated for years. Now, she was about to prove everyone wrong about how much strength she could muster when cornered. Word of the court case circulated fast within the family, then outside. Some relatives were stunned. Others, in hushed tones, weren't surprised at all. Robyn, sources say, was caught off guard. She didn't believe Christine would go that far. But Christine was not only going far, she was going all the way. Because this wasn't about dividing up assets, this was about shining years of favoritism and unfairness in the bright light of truth. The show was about to go on. The evidence was in place, and Christine, for the first time in a long while, felt like she was finally at the helm of her own life. What transpired next in that courtroom would forever alter the sister wives' family and leave Robyn with a reality she never envisioned. If you considered the past sessions intense, what took place next within that courtroom seemed to resemble a scene out of a courtroom drama show, only this one wasn't scripted. And there weren't any retakes. Each and every individual within it could sense the dense strain of tension in the room. Even the buzz of the air conditioner seemed to grow quiet, supplanted by the beat of a dozen hearts pounding as one. Christine leaned back in her chair, spine straight, eyes fixed on Robyn like a hawk staring down its prey. Robyn, meanwhile, did her best to keep her typical calm, composed look. But if you really looked, you could spot the shake in her hands as she gripped her notes. She knew the storm had arrived, and she couldn't flee from it. The judge, a severe-featured woman of about 60, cleared her throat and announced, "Mrs. Brown, you may proceed." That was Christine's signal. With deliberate deliberateness, Christine stood up. Her heels clicked on the highly polished wooden floor, sounding like a countdown. Each step she took to the center of the court was like the winding of a noose around Robyn's defense. When Christine got to speak, her tone wasn't loud, but it held the kind of authority that forced everyone to lean forward. This isn't about money disputes. This is about years of manipulation, control, and emotional sabotage, all designed to tear apart a family that was once united. There was a murmur in the audience. Even the court clerk stopped mid-typing. Christine looked at Robyn, making eye contact with her. You entered this family, promising sisterhood, promising unity, but secretly you had a plan to cut the rest of us out, one by one. Robyn's face went red, but she didn't interrupt, yet. Christine started presenting her evidence like a mystery novelist unraveling the plot. She first mentioned private text messages, ones Robyn supposedly sent to Cody, labeling the other wives as unstable and toxic. Next were the financial reports, indicating unexplained amounts withdrawn from the shared family accounts immediately after Cody's trips to Robyn's house. With each new piece of evidence, each new blow to her carefully constructed facade, Robyn's face grew redder and redder. Robyn's lawyer attempted to object multiple times, but the judge overruled them and stated Christine was constructing an applicable case. That just gave Christine more momentum. Let me be clear, Your Honor, Christine went on, facing back to the judge. This isn't all about money. It's about the emotional damage done when one person consciously keeps other people away from their support group, while portraying themselves as the victim. The crowd gasped again, because this was not simply a court fight. This was years of personal background, anger, and betrayal pouring into the forefront. Robyn finally lost it. That's not true, she yelled, her voice cracking. You have no idea what I endured, Christine. You always blamed me because you couldn't believe that Cody loved me. Christine didn't blink. Instead, she smiled. Not a sneer of mockery, but a smile someone gives when they realize they've just received the perfect opportunity. "Thank you for making my case," Christine whispered. "It was never about love, Robyn. It was about control, and you knew just how to achieve it." The judge slammed the gavel down to restore order, but the harm was already done to Robyn's credibility. That tiny emotional lapse had said more than hours of cross-examination would have. Then Christine changed tone. She addressed the court directly, regarding the cost the manipulation had exacted, not only on her, but on the children, the relationships and the family name. She described in stark detail birthdays that were missed because of silent vendettas, holidays when the tension was so palpable that no one could bring themselves to speak, and children raised thinking their mothers despised each other. At the end of it all, there were tears in the eyes of a few of the audience members, and even the court stenographer had to take a moment to collect herself. Robyn's defense attempted to bounce back, summoning witnesses to testify on her behalf. Some of her friends gave testimony to the fact that she was a good mother and a good wife. But the issue was, Christine had already sowed the seed of doubt into everyone's mind, and the moment that seed has been planted, it's nigh on impossible to uproot. The courtroom mood had changed entirely. Christine wasn't merely defending herself, she was taking back her narrative. And Robyn, formerly the groomed and inaccessible favorite, now appeared cornered and exposed. The coup de grace was Christine's presentation of a taped conversation between Cody and Robyn 2 years prior. Robyn was heard in the recording telling Cody, "If the others don't like it, they can leave. It'll be better for us anyway." As the words were spoken aloud in the courtroom, everyone came to a standstill. The message was unmistakable. Robyn had willingly declared her readiness to have the other wives removed. Robyn's lawyer protested the playing of the tape, but the judge permitted it, saying it was directly pertinent to the collapse of the family. And in an instant, Robyn's facade disintegrated. She leaned back in her chair, lips quivering, eyes shifting between her attorney and the judge. She did not attempt to protest. She did not attempt to justify. For Christine, that moment wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Years of whispered conversations, quiet betrayals, and behind-the-scenes manipulation were finally in the light. By the time the judge requested a recess, everyone present knew that the power had shifted. Christine was no longer the outsider. She held the reins now. And Robyn, for the first time, appeared as if she were going to lose more than the case. As Christine returned to her seat, she brushed Robyn aside without even a glance. She didn't have to say a word. The expression on Robyn's face was all she needed to convey. The battle of war in the courtroom was far from finished. But Christine had just emerged the victor of the most crucial fight. And deep inside, Robyn knew it. The air within the courtroom was motionless. All eyes in the gallery were fixed on the judge, every individual paralyzed, as she weighed her decision. For weeks, the sister wives' family drama had been lived on television, online, and now, in the most theatrical environment imaginable, in a courtroom. The stakes couldn't be higher. Custody rulings, monetary settlements, and reputations were all on the line. Christine sat at her table, her shoulders set and unflinching. She wasn't here to win only. She was here to demonstrate that the years of manipulation, favoritism, and emotional travail were at an end. Next to her, her lawyer had a quiet smile, as if certain the evidence they had brought was watertight. Across from him, Robyn sat rigid, from time to time looking in Cody's direction, but he refused to meet anyone's eyes. His face was ashen, his jaw clenched. For one accustomed to being in command, he now appeared helpless. The judge started off by talking about the core of the case, the erosion of trust between members of the family. "This court has heard from several parties," she started, "and has seen considerable evidence in regards to how financial assets were managed, where minor children lived, and the ways in which decision-making contributed to the breakdown of this family unit." They were words of quiet, but every phrase was like a hammer against the table. Christine's gaze never wavered from the face of the judge. She wanted, to hear those next words. "The evidence demonstrates," the judge went on, "a pattern of consistent favoritism, mismanagement of joint finances, and emotional neglect of some family members. These actions have led importantly to the irreparable disintegration of the sister wives' family unit." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Robyn slumped her shoulders as if the gravity of the words held her down. Cody shifted in his chair, his fists clenched. The judge continued. Based on the testimonies and detailed evidence, this court rules in favor of Christine Brown for financial reparations and custodial arrangements. The sentence struck like a clap of thunder. Christine's hold on her lawyer's hand became tighter. She had done it. Years of being silenced, questioned and deposed. And she had finally been heard, not only by fans half a world away, but by a court of law. But the judge wasn't finishing there. This decision also recognizes the undue influence brought to bear on family decisions at the expense of several parties. The court suggests continued mediation between the still married spouses to hammer out remaining issues. Although the main issues before us today are here closed. The gavel came down, swift and absolute. And that was it. The case was done. Christine relaxed against the back of her chair, exhaling a breath she didn't even know she had been holding. Robyn across the aisle seemed to want to protest, but her lawyer held on to her arm, ever so firmly indicating that it was done. The face of Cody was one of shock and outrage. The face of a man who had just been denied control of the only woman he believed would ever leave him. As Christine was collecting her papers, one could already hear the whispers beginning in the courtroom. Some were shocked by the verdict, while others claimed that they had seen it coming right from the start. The public gallery was packed with fans, critics and curious members of the public, all waiting to see the last chapter of this family saga. Outside there was already the media throng waiting. Cameras, microphones and popping bulbs transformed the courthouse steps into a hub. Christine's lawyer had told her to keep her statement short, but Christine understood that now was her time. She emerged, the biting wind whipping her face, and gazed straight into the cameras. For years, she started, her tone firm but choked with emotion. I was informed that my feelings didn't count. I was instructed to make other people's happiness more important than my own. But I discovered something. If you do not stand for yourself, nobody else will. Today the truth was acknowledged. And I hope my story teaches others it is never too late to reclaim your life. The audience burst into cheers and shouts. But Christine provided no additional information. She turned, striding away from the courthouse with a calm resolve that seemed eons away from the woman who had begun this battle months earlier. In the meantime, Robyn and Cody slipped out the back door, dodging the media. According to sources, Cody was furious, grumbling under his breath about betrayal and bias. Robyn was said to be visibly shaken, dodging reporters altogether. The aftershocks followed hard on the heels of the decision. Social media was abuzz with #Team Christine and #Justice for Christine. But others were arguing over whether the decision was actually just or merely a publicity stunt. Ex-Sister Wives cast members weighed in on the web, some defending Christine, others demanding that the family get their act together for the sake of their children. Within days, Christine's public persona transformed overnight. She wasn't simply a reality TV personality anymore. She was a beacon of empowerment and strength. Her Instagram following boomed. Interviews were lined up by major networks, and fans inundated her with messages of support. For Robyn and Cody, things did not go as well. It was reported that the cost had been high, and that tensions between the remaining wives in Cody's life were higher than ever. The family unit that had long been touted as united under one man, seemed broken beyond repair. But to Christine, it wasn't so much about winning in court. It was about ending an open wound and starting a new chapter on her own terms. She started making plans to relocate to a new city, one outside the shadow of her past. She would tease in interviews about writing a book, telling her side of the story in her own words. And most significantly, she let it be known that she would always love and remember her children, but she would never again see herself devalued or ignored. As one observer on a popular television talk show phrased it, this wasn't Christine's victory alone. It was a victory for anyone who's ever been told to shut up and take it. She said something, she remained steadfast, and she left more powerful than ever. The Sister Wives drama may have been put to rest in court that day, but the reverberations of the ruling would resound for years. And though Robyn and Cody may have been trying to move on quietly, the world was now paying attention, and Christine had center stage. She didn't just weather the storm, she claimed it. You might have been able to hear a pin drop in that courtroom, until Christine Brown let the bomb fall that muzzled even Robyn's self-satisfied smile. That was the moment that the Sister Wives family drama went from reality TV soap opera to a genuine live legal battle. The cameras weren't on this time. This wasn't staged. This was raw, unfiltered truth. And Christine wasn't fighting only for her rights. She was fighting to reveal years of favoritism, betrayal, and lies. Today, I'm bringing you inside that courtroom, inside the secrets that destroyed this family, and exposing the real reason the sister wives will never be the same again. But to know Christine's triumph, we must look back to when the cracks in the family began to develop. On television, the sister wives family appeared to be a beacon of happiness and togetherness. 4 wives, 1 husband, a brood of children, and a unified vision of starting a life together. At least, that's what the cameras depicted. Behind the scenes, Christine was already feeling invisible. She'd sacrificed years of her life, raised children, and helped keep the family together. But she began to notice something disturbing. Whenever important family decisions were being made, Cody seemed to gravitate towards one wife's advice. Robyn's. Initially, Christine dismissed it. After all, there are always times in every family when a person's voice is louder. But as time passed, it wasn't Robyn's voice that was always louder. It was Robyn's influence, Robyn's desires, and Robyn's way of life that were taking priority. It was subtle, at first, but it was there. And it was increasing. But favoritism is one thing. What followed would convince Christine that she was no longer simply being overlooked, she was being pushed aside. The game changer was when Cody and Robyn began discussing purchasing their dream home. To Christine, it was a slap in the face. Why? Because the funds for that house weren't solely from Robyn. They were from the collective family money, funds that were meant to be distributed equally among all of them. Christine had her own goals, her own kids, and her own aspirations. But now, the things she believed were available to the entire family were being poured into Robyn's idealized little universe. When Christine asked why, she wasn't given answers. She was given excuses. She was told to trust the process and be patient. But patience only goes so far. Christine wasn't simply being excluded from the conversation anymore. She was being excluded from her own future. It wasn't a single moment. It was years of little betrayals piled high like bricks. And eventually Christine came to understand the foundation of her marriage, and the sister wives' family was crumbling. One evening, after yet another heated argument regarding finances, Christine made up her mind. She wasn't going to simmer quietly in the background. She was going to battle. And when she found documents revealing just how much money had been diverted, she knew where that battle would rage. In court. This wasn't an internal family conflict anymore. This was going to be public. This was going to be serious. And believe me, Robyn had no clue what was coming her way. The hearing day, Christine strode in peaceful, unruffled, prepared. She didn't just have a tale, she had proof. Witnesses report that Robyn arrived with her typical self-assured attitude, believing this was going to be merely a dispute she could spin around. However, that attitude was short-lived. Christine testified and, with never a falter in her voice, set out the facts, the financial disparity, the favoritism, and the emotional strain it had placed upon her and her children. She provided documents detailing how common funds were spent disproportionately in favor of Robyn. She produced timelines that aligned with perfect precision with her testimony. And then she produced the sentence that dominated the headlines. This was never going to be about creating a family together. This was going to be about creating Robyn's kingdom, and the rest of us were just supposed to serve it. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Even the judge leaned forward. But Christine wasn't finished yet, and her next move would leave Robyn reeling. Christine's lawyers didn't merely obsess about the finances. They obsessed about the commitments, the vows of equality, the public perception of fairness, the notion that all wives had a voice. By the end of Christine's testimony, the vision of an intact sister wives family was destroyed. What was left was a view of control, imbalance, and neglect. When the verdict was in, it was evident Christine had prevailed. She reclaimed her economic rights, autonomy, and something much greater, her dignity. Christine emerged from that courtroom unfettered. For the first time in years, she didn't have to compete for love or respect. She began a new chapter, one where she could construct her own life without standing in someone else's shadow. In the meantime, the rest of the family was left to rebuild. The public got the picture. The image so carefully constructed was destroyed. And Robyn, she was left aware that no spin could wipe away what had been laid out before them by Christine. It wasn't one fight. It wasn't just over a house or funds. It was about years of favoritism, power struggles, and broken promises. Christine's courtroom win was the last act. But the narrative of how the family unraveled had been written years earlier. And now the world knows. You could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom. That was how one onlooker summed up the atmosphere when Christine Brown appeared. Her expression serene, but her eyes ablaze with something fierce, something conclusive. All those people in that room knew they were in for something momentous, but few appreciated just how far beneath the surface the cracks had spread. From the outside in, the sister wives' household had been marketed to the world as a daring, unorthodox foray in love and harmony. 4 wives and 1 husband, a lively brood of kids, all under one roof of bliss. It was a way of life that intrigued some, appalled others, and had millions of viewers watching season after season. But what the cameras showed was only half the tale. The interview smiles, the family dinner scenes, the assurances of equality, those were the sightings. The TV moments selectively edited for prime time. Off camera, the emotional truth was a lot more complicated. Christine was not the youngest wife, but she had been one of the most faithful. For years she had played her part in good faith, supporting the children, maintaining the household, and making sacrifices for the benefit of the family. She had believed in the doctrine of plural marriage, or at least she had initially. But as the days went by, she began to notice something that bothered her. Something she would try to sweep under the rug but could not shake. Cody's focus, attention and resources appeared to be being pulled increasingly toward one individual. Robyn. It began small. Perhaps Robyn's viewpoint held a little more sway in family conversations. Perhaps Cody's body language was more relaxed, his voice gentler when talking to her. Christine caught herself, but she reassured herself she was paranoid. After all, in a household this big, it stood to reason some voices were louder than others now and then. Right. But the imbalance did not disappear. Instead, it seemed to intensify. Family events that were once a collaboration gradually started to revolve around Robyn's desires. Decisions that once were made together became conversations between Cody and Rob, with the other wives informed in hindsight. Christine, who had always been vociferous, was being pushed aside, not only in decisions but in emotional space. One of the first times that this stuck in her craw was when there was a family gathering to discuss school options for the children. Christine had thoughts. She had researched. She was prepared to be heard. But when she voiced them, Cody interrupted her and turned to Robyn and asked what she thought. Robyn shared her 2 cents. And it was done, as if what Christine said never happened. It was a quiet humiliation, but it hurt. And those kinds of moments continued to happen. In the next few years, Christine's feeling of place began to disintegrate. She reminded herself to hold on for the kids, to keep in mind why she married into this family. But the little voice in her mind continued to repeat, "This isn't the same marriage you agreed to." And then there was the money factor. The sister wives' household functioned under the premise of common resources. What's mine is mine, what's yours is mine too. Theoretically, it was a model of equality, but Christine started to see that shared did not necessarily equal equal. When she wanted money for her kids' activities or for home repairs, the process was like pulling teeth. But when Robyn requested something, the answer came more quickly, and without the same level of inspection. Christine wondered at first if she was just dreaming it. She didn't want to believe there was favoritism, because if there was, it would mean the very root of their family's values was a lie. By the time Robyn was speaking freely about purchasing a dream home, Christine's silent reservations had developed into outright resentment. It wasn't so much the house itself, it was where the money was being taken from. Christine was aware of the figures. She had been privy to the budget discussions, and she was aware that the money for the dream home was being taken out of the fund for all, the same pot that had been too tight when Christine needed help. It was in that moment she realized this wasn't just about love or companionship anymore. It was about power. And in this family, Robyn had it, and Christine didn't. Now imagine living like that day in and day out. Imagine putting on a smile for the cameras while inside you're drowning in frustration and hurt. Christine had learned to compartmentalize, to smile for birthdays, to laugh at group dinners, to steady her voice when fans asked after the family. But behind the closed doors, she was counting the minutes she'd been forgotten, adding up the sacrifices she'd made that hadn't been recognized. The breaking point was imminent. She could sense it. There was one night, very early on before the court case, that encapsulated everything for Christine. It was a cold evening, and the family had all congregated in the living room discussing plans for the future. Christine had had an idea, and she put it forward, suggesting that they go back to the initial plan of each wife having her own separate home. It was a proposal that would provide everyone with their own space and some much-needed independence. Cody didn't even think about it. He just looked over at Robyn and asked, "What do you think we should do?" And that was it. That was the instant Christine knew. This wasn't her family anymore. Not really. She was in it, but she wasn't of it. She didn't realize it yet, but that evening would be the genesis of the choice that would culminate in her taking her life to court. It was the evening she gave up hope that things would improve, and began thinking about how she could regain control over her life. When she did enter that courtroom months later, she wasn't the same Christine who had stood silently in the background all those years. She was a woman pushed aside too many times, a woman told wait your turn, until she was convinced her turn would never arrive. She was done waiting, and the next step she would take would surprise Robyn. It would transform the sister wives' family for good. If there was one time that made Christine's doubts turn to a certainty, it was the dream house. Not any house. Not a random idea. This was the house Robyn had been going on about for months. Like it was fate. Somewhere she could envision herself forever. Christine recalled the very first time she had heard Robyn say it. She had been having coffee in the kitchen one morning before the younger children woke up. Robyn was going through photos on her phone, holding Cody's attention with an almost childlike glee. Christine smiled graciously, but something in the intensity with which Cody's eyes lit up distressed her. Not the enthusiasm itself, but the rapidity with which he was on board. Most of the wives had brought up dreams over the years. Homes they liked, places they wanted to live, vacations they hoped to take. Christine had learned that these conversations usually went nowhere. They were nice ideas, but never the right time. But with Robyn, it was different. Cody didn't say, "We'll see." He said, "Let's make it happen." Christine didn't know it yet, but that moment would become a turning point. The more she learned about this dream house, the more uncomfortable she became. It wasn't the house. It was the money. The sister wives' household had always been run on a group financial agreement. Everyone pitched in, everyone received. Well, at least that's what they believed. But Christine knew firsthand that this equality of sharing didn't always feel all that equal. When her own house required repairs, she waited. When her daughter required braces, the funds had to be found within the budget. But now, there was a proposal for a huge new acquisition, and lo and behold, funds magically appeared. Christine attempted to raise her concerns during a family forum. She posed the inevitable question, "Where is this money coming from?" Cody was prompt to reply, "From the family fund. We all get a share from common assets." Christine's heart fell. Common assets was meant to be a promise of a fair slice for everyone. But it was evident to her now, this dream house was going to be Robyn's slice, and the rest of them were just going to have to go through the motions. The conversation didn't go well. Christine voiced her frustration, saying it felt unfair. Cody brushed it off, insisting that the home would be a good investment for the family's future. Robyn, sitting next to him, said softly, "We'll make sure everyone's needs are taken care of too." Christine heard the words, but she didn't believe them. Not anymore. That evening she sat alone at her kitchen table well after bedtime for the children, crunching figures on a piece of paper. She knew to the penny what the family earned each month. She knew to the penny how much this dream home would cost. And she knew, with not a hint of question, that footing the bill would crowd out her own priorities for years to come. The arithmetic didn't deceive. The dream home would be a reality for Robyn, at the cost of reality for Christine. Weeks passed, and the dream home talk became a foregone conclusion. The enthusiasm in the tone of voice between Cody and Robyn was unmistakable. They began talking about paint, furniture arrangements, and even lawn design prior to the sale being complete. Christine felt herself receding from reality in those moments, as if she wasn't even in the picture anymore. She could be in the same room, and still feel like no one saw her. The worst part? Seeing how fast it was all moving. Christine had spent years trying to get permission for some of these costs, always being told it would take time or need discussion. But this was moving at lightning speed. In a manner of speaking, that speed said it all to Christine. There was a specific afternoon which remained etched in her mind. The family was seated for dinner when Cody declared that the bid on Robyn's dream house had been accepted. The room was filled with congratulations and smiles. Christine politely clapped, but her heart was sick. When Christine caught Robyn's eye, Robyn smiled slightly. It wasn't smug necessarily, but it wasn't neutral either. It was the smile of a person who had received just what they had been wanting. Christine escaped from the table shortly after, locking herself in her room just to breathe. She didn't sleep much that night. She relived the last few years in her head. Every decision, every moment she had been asked to wait, to compromise, to be patient. And now, here was evidence that when it came to Robyn, patience was unnecessary. If Cody wanted something to happen for Robyn, it happened. The anger didn't come all at once. It seethed. Christine was accustomed to swallowing her irritation in the interest of maintaining harmony. But this time it was different. This wasn't some minor slight. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was the most blatant indication so far that her position in this marriage, in this family, wasn't equal. Christine started quietly reading up. She went through financial statements, budget analyses, and records of property. The more she read, the more she understood how skewed the balance had become. The family fund was not only being expended unevenly, it was being spent in a manner that made Robyn's side of the family constantly more secure, more comfortable, and better provided for than the others. When Christine had words with Cody in private about it, the discussion went about as poorly as she anticipated. That is, very badly. Cody called her jealous. He accused her of making drama. He insisted that she didn't get the long-term plan. But Christine got it perfectly. She got that the long-term plan did not involve her at all. After that discussion, something changed within her. She ceased attempting to battle for a space within the system. She ceased expecting fairness. Instead, she began to contemplate an exit. And when the last documents were written up for Robyn's ideal home, Christine had her breaking point. This wasn't about a house. It was about all the choices that had put her in the background. It was about doing everything for the family only to find out she was never going to come first, or even second, in Cody's life. It was about realizing that no matter how much she gave, she would never receive the same. The dream home may have been Robyn's fairy tale ending, but for Christine, it was the beginning of her freedom. She didn't exactly know how yet, but she knew she wasn't going to continue living like this. Because sometimes a dream home for one individual is the wake-up call another person needs in order to finally leave. Christine had spent years feeling invisible. She'd swallowed her anger at family gatherings, smiled through painful moments, and assured herself it was just a tough time. But the dream house had taken her over a line she didn't even know she'd established in her heart. It wasn't a house. It was a neon sign yelling in her face. You don't count here. For several weeks following the finalization of the dream house purchase, Christine floated through the days in a shadow of her former self. She cooked, she cleaned, she tended to her children, but mentally she was elsewhere. The pain had ossified into something more pointed: resentment. Folks believe breakups come from one huge thing: betrayal, fight, lie. But for Christine, it wasn't all about the dream house. That was just the last punch after 1,000 tiny ones. There was the family vacation she hadn't been asked about. The birthday bash, where her plans for the celebration were disregarded until Robyn made the same proposal. And voila, a great plan. Budget sessions where her proposals were too costly, while those of Robyn were sanctioned the following week. Each time it occurred, Christine reminded herself to let it go. But letting go was a full-time job in itself, and she was exhausted. One evening, once the children were in bed, Christine sat in her kitchen table with stacks of papers in front of her. She wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't an accountant. But she was a mother, a wife, and a woman who knew when something didn't add up. And these figures didn't balance. The deeper she uncovered, the more she understood how much of the common family money had diverted. Mortgage payments for Robyn's house. The cost of her children's requirements paid without doubting. Even personal expenditures that Christine could hardly hope to manage.
Christine's own demands in the meantime had been cut back, delayed, or downright refused. It wasn't favoritism anymore, it was institutional disparity. Christine settled back into her chair, gazing at the documents before her. Reality crashed down on her like a tidal wave. This wasn't going to change. Not with a discussion. Not with tolerance, not with faking that everything was okay. The following day, Christine went to speak with Cody. She did not scream, she did not accuse. She put the documents down before him and said, quietly, how do you explain this? Cody looked at the papers, then huffed like a child who didn't know the game. Christine, you're making too much out of this. These are family bills. Robyn's part of the family. Christine's tone was calm, but her heart was racing. So am I, so are my kids. Where was this sort of support when we needed it? Instead of answering, Cody got defensive. He talked about investments, long-term plans, and how she was letting jealousy cloud her judgment. Jealousy. The term hung in the air like a curse. Christine could feel it in her bones, not because it was accurate, but because it was the most expedient way for him to shut her up without having to deal with what she was saying. After that talk, Christine knew there was no salvaging this. She ceased to dream of a future where things would go back the way they were. She ceased to repeat to herself the marriage simply needed time. This was no longer a partnership. This was a hierarchy. And she was tired of living on the bottom. Christine didn't make her next step out of anger. She made it out of clarity. She started to record everything. Dates, transactions, conversation. She talked softly with an attorney, explaining what was happening, and asking what she could do. What she discovered astonished her. She was entitled to battle over her portion of the family fortune. And she had the proof to support her. It wasn't just about the finances, it was about principle, about demonstrating to her children, and to herself, that she wouldn't be trampled on anymore. The last straw came in another budget meeting. Cody declared more money would go toward renovations for Robyn's house. Christine asked if they might finally approve a long-sought education program for one of her kids. Cody paused, then said, "It's not the right time." Something within Christine broke. She did not argue. She did not even speak. She sat, silently aware of exactly what she would do next. Forgetting about the family without a struggle may have been simpler, but Christine had no use for doing things the simple way. She had an interest in justice. She was well aware that this fight would be ugly. She was aware that Robyn would feign victimhood, and Cody would attempt to characterize her as bitter. She was aware the public would likely judge her.